whatever your expensive appliances are now, I guess get ready to buy a new refrigerator and change out your air conditioning. Climate change deniers, like myself, are now being deemed as threats to humanity.
I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjakovic.
And we are unapologetically outspoken. Hey, everybody, happy Friday. So today, Stephanie and I are just going to give another update on some of the craziness going on when it comes to, let's see, energy, appliances, the climate. And I'm going to start out with basically the war on appliances. And we've talked in the past about how like the Biden administration has gone after gas stoves. And like a few weeks ago, what was it? Fans. I think it
Ceiling
was
fans, yeah.
yes, ceiling fans. Well, now it's refrigerators and air conditioners. So last Friday, the EPA announced two new actions targeting the use of hydrofluorocarbons or HFCs, which are basically chemicals that are commonly used in both refrigerators and air conditioners. And these new proposed regulations are going to restrict HFCs in 40 different types of imported and domestically produced foams, aerosols, refrigeration equipment, air conditioning, and heat pumps, because the Biden administration refers to these as, quote, planet warming chemicals. So this is all part of the Biden administration's initiative to reduce overall use of HFCs by 40% between 2024 and 2028. And so, of course, as with all energy efficient appliances, this translates into consumers having to spend more money and, more importantly, not having a choice in what they want to buy. So I read an article in the Daily Reporter that was talking about how the US Energy Information Administration statistics indicate that 90% of American households use air conditioning to cool their homes. And I'm sure that percentage is similar or probably even greater for refrigerators, because that's a common household appliance in most homes. So whatever your expensive appliances are now, I guess get ready to buy a new refrigerator and change out your air conditioning.
That's crazy. Like, I live in Florida and I need my air conditioner. Like, literally need it. There will be mold everywhere without air conditioning here. You know what I was thinking about when you were talking is like, are they trying to switch all these appliances because they know that our grid can't handle the surge when they switch all these cars to electric?
Well, my conspiracy theory brain is that it's like all about control, right? The more we can
Mm-hmm.
get on these energy efficient appliances that are all controlled electrically, that the government can then assume that control when they want to. Like
Yeah.
it's all part of the plan. That's how I see it. It
Yep.
has
You're right.
nothing to do with the climate. But speaking of the climate, I don't know if you saw this, Stephanie, but a couple weeks ago, New York City was hit with like this massive storm. I think it was September 29th. And I guess the city declared a state of emergency. Their restaurants and subways and apartment buildings in like Brooklyn and Manhattan were flooded. They had to ground flights. The airports were flooded. Apparently, a sea lion escaped from its enclosure at the Central Park Zoo because the water rose high enough that it was able to swim over the wall. And so, of course, and I'm wondering, like, what happened with all the migrants, like sleeping
Right.
on
Sleeping on the streets.
sleeping
Yeah,
on the streets and at the airport bus terminals? But I guess this storm is, of course, being blamed on climate change. So I
of
read an
course.
article. Yeah, of course it is. So I read an article in The Guardian that reported, like, immediately after the storm, a group of scientists in Europe did this rapid attribution study. And the results of their study, they're claiming that the rain in New York City was 10 to 20% wetter than it would have been in the previous century. And that's because of human driven climate change. The rain is wetter. Like, does that even make sense?
Oh, it
No.
doesn't matter because if the news says it, people will believe it, you know?
Yeah, but once again, I'm going to go against the climate change narrative and bring up what I think is the real problem, which is overpopulation and building in flood zones. And we've talked about this in the past. But even CNN recently reported that there was a study published in this journal called Nature. It was reported last Wednesday. And the study looked at building between 1985 and 2015, and there was an increase in urbanization by 85%. That's a fucking shit ton. And the number of settlements, and when they use the term settlements, they're referring to anything from small villages to like mega cities. And they were saying the number of settlements with the highest flood exposure increased by 122%.
Wow. Well, what I'm more concerned about than the rain is just human beings in general and how stupid people are getting, because the subway system was like flooded. There was water coming through the walls, like gushing through the walls, and there were still people getting on the subway to go ride. It's electric and there's water I'm just like, okay, this is more concerning to me than like anything else. Like, what happened to common sense, And then I had to laugh because some guy posted a video and he's like, I just love New Yorkers. He's like, we always find solutions. He said, I just ordered an Uber boat and he's going to come pick me up on the street, like get me to where I need to go. But no, like seriously, it's just crazy. And, them talking about like, okay, well, it's wetter than it would have been a century ago. It's like that's such a small amount of time in the grand scheme of things. So I still say like everything is cyclical, and these extremes, and I'm going to talk about this in a second, have nothing to do with us human beings, in my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of real scientists that are not just CNN paid people. So I actually came across this meteorologist. His name is Joe Bastardi, and he was explaining that the warming that we're experiencing is not the result of human beings using, things that emit CO2. It's the result of undersea volcanoes erupting and releasing an immense amount of heat into the water and atmosphere. To me, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And I know it's just like a small blip in the news world, but we have heard about these various volcanoes over the past few years, and I think one earlier this year. And he said the extreme weather events like the rain in New York are also not caused by humans, but instead they're caused by El Nino. And if you look at the patterns, the last two times we had El Nino, and then again this year we have it, you see these same extreme cycles play out where there are big storms, there's a ton of rain, and then they're followed by an intense cooling period. So he's saying we're going to see a very cold winter this year, followed by probably very devastating hurricanes next year, not because of what humans are doing, it's because of El Nino. And he went on to play devil's advocate, and he's like, all right, let's just assume that these were in fact caused by CO2 emissions. He's like, the United States has enough foliage to completely get rid of all CO2 emissions that humans create. And he said that we have 229 billion trees in the United States, and CO2 emissions is 11.3 trillion, which he said is able to be absorbed by all of those trees that we currently have. And this guy's like an environmentalist. He's very much for helping the planet. And he goes and he talks to lawmakers about real solutions. And he made the point that every single lawmaker that he's talked about, they don't know even the basic facts. They don't know how many trees we have. They have no idea how much CO2 is in our environment, how much is taken in by the trees, how much is emitted every year. They're clueless about these basic facts. And I know we've talked about that before. And it just goes to show it's not about saving the planet. This whole agenda is really about two things. One is about funding the elitist investments. They're all invested in these various companies that are producing electric. And then the other is about control, like you were saying, Tara. And he said, if we truly want to help the environment, the solution is plant more trees, use nuclear power, and then use carbon capture combustor, which is something available to all these different companies, but no one knows about it and no one's talking about it. So apparently, like CO2 doesn't even have to be released due to this new technology, but no one's even talking about it. Why? Because that would go against this narrative and they wouldn't be able to take things away from us and have more control if we had real solutions like this. So I want to know, like, all of these activists and environmentalists, where are they? And why aren't they talking about these simple things that could be done, like planting more trees? And like, why electric and not nuclear? Why are they so against nuclear? And, again, it's because all of the people in charge are invested heavily in electric. That's the reason.
Yeah, you are 100% correct there. And on top of that, climate change deniers like myself are now being deemed as threats to humanity. And it's possible that we could be facing criminal charges. And I'm going to try to play this clip, and I'm going to hope I can with my shitty internet connection, but let's see what happens.
Punish people who reject narratives on climate change. People who don't believe in the concept are being labeled as threats to humanity. And proposals on what to do with them include censorship or worse. Here to speak with us about this is James Gorey, Epoch Times contributor and author of The China Crisis. Hey, James, thanks for being here.
How you doing, Josh? Nice to be here.
Doing well. So, UNESCO is saying that postercide is a morally required response to human-induced climate change. I've never heard of postercide. What is that?
I hadn't either. I have to confess. I had to look it up, actually. Apparently, it's the justified, the side part means killing. So it's the justified homicide, or at least some kind of persecution of someone who speaks contrary to the settled science of climate change. It's crazy, but that's what's coming out of UNESCO.
Well, I mean, that's pretty crazy. I mean, so what are they actually suggesting should be done to people? I mean, we've heard of censorship. I think we're at the censorship stage now pretty much globally. If you question the climate change narrative, they're going to push you at least off social media. But what else are they suggesting? Where do you think this is heading?
Yeah, they're suggesting jail terms. They're suggesting demonetization, lack of careers, taking you out of your job, taking you out of your career. It started from actions, and now they've gone to words, and now they're thinking of thinking, of monitoring your thoughts, and so it's a specialized language, Josh. Where let's create a new language like the postercide and the Anthropocene, or however that might be pronounced, to kind of denote an expertise or an exclusivity that doesn't really exist, but it gives it that patina of something new and different and more intelligent than you or I. So it kind of has that. It's ridiculous to the point of very dangerous.
Well, I mean, people really wonder, does UNESCO have...
Okay, so I'm not going to keep continuing that clip, but you got the point, right?
That's terrifying.
Right, exactly. And what's even more terrifying is that now you have the Pope, who is like on board with this whole thing. He gave a press conference on October 5th at the Vatican. And during that press conference, he basically warned that mankind is on the verge of destroying its own conditions of existence. He blamed the United States for disproportionately causing emissions that are driving global warming. And people are referring to his speech as prophecy. And so this is all happening ahead of the UN's upcoming COP28 climate summit, which is going to be taking place in Dubai next month. And it's expected that there's going to be 197 countries present. And what is the whole focus of that going to be?
Climate change.
Climate change.
And how they can lock us down and control us all in the name of climate change. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Wow. Well, what I don't understand, and with the Pope's speech as well, is why aren't they addressing the real threats to humanity in our world, which are people that are encouraging and funding these wars? The biggest CO2 emissions release ever was when the Nord Stream 2 pipeline exploded. And evidence points to the US being behind that. So the same people that are all high and mighty trying to ban refrigerators and gas cars and ceiling fans in the name of climate change are like funding these wars where bombs are being ignited left and right. And like somehow that's okay, but a gas car is not okay. You know what I mean? It's like, when are people going to wake up and realize this is all about power and control?
Well, just like it's okay to take your private jet to the climate change conference, but we're going to restrict normal people from traveling on, domestic flights.
Yep. It's all about the rich getting richer. And if we don't have cars and common appliances, it's easier for them to convince us to move into their 15-minute cities where we have everything we need and everything's so close and convenient. We don't need to travel. Like, it's all part of this insane plan to control the masses.
Yeah. And then meanwhile, you have the climate activist wackos that are out in full force, and especially in Europe, which I find very interesting now. So you had German activists that blocked traffic in front of the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin with bales of hay and straw last week. At the same time in London, you had a group of climate activists that stormed the stage of a West End production of Les Miserables on Wednesday. And they had like these giant banners saying the show can't go on. And they used bicycle locks to secure themselves to set pieces during the show. So obviously they had to like stop the show. And then in Portugal, you had climate activists on Tuesday who tried to block a highway. And with this one, there's actually some pretty awesome video clips because the motorists were pissed off. And so you could see them in these clips. They get out of their cars and they are literally dragging protesters off the road. They're tearing down their banners and they are like unceremoniously just like dump them on the side of the road and then get back in their cars and drive away.
Oh, good for them. Like, that's the kind of stuff we need to start doing here in the United States, really everywhere. It's like, why are we going along with this? Stand up to the nonsense and complete absurdity. And, if those activists would have spent their time and energy planting trees, they could have actually made a difference. But like, what is stopping a play or a production like going to do? I mean, it's so stupid. I don't get it.
I don't get anything these people do.
No. Meanwhile, I still want to know if they had to get their hands amputated when they.
I was going to say, like, why would you injure yourself by gluing your hand to asphalt?
It just shows like there's no common sense.
No.
And I guarantee if you asked any one of them, like, okay, so what are the CO2 emissions? What's normal? What's not? Like, they would not know the basics because there's no sense behind it. They're just, they're just crazy. That's my take on it. Maybe we're the crazy ones, Tara. Maybe we're going to end up getting arrested and thrown in jail for questioning the climate change narrative. But
I feel like I'm the crazy one when I read all this shit and that like people think it's normal. And when you look at like kids who have mental problems because of their fear of climate change, like, am I the crazy one?
Well, instead of like calling us crazy or conspiracy theorists, like, how about just look into it? Just spend 5 minutes doing like the smallest amount of research. I don't get it, but that's the world we're living in. Like, people are just going to believe it because they hear it all the time. It's that whole classical conditioning, like Pavlov's dog. Like, that's what we're at that point now where people just don't use common sense and research and judgment anymore. And it's pretty scary.
Yep.
But it's also kind of funny. So, all right. Well, that's our update on the climate. My gosh, we have like an update every week because it just keeps getting more insane. But we'll keep everyone posted. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you back here next week. If you're sick of all the crazy shit going on in our country and you want to express your support and patriotism for the show, head on over to our Etsy store at UO Patriot Chicks and check out our new stickers. The link can also be found on our website. If you love the show and you want exclusive episodes, support the podcast and join the conversation by becoming a member of our Patreon community. We'll be posting weekly member-only podcast episodes and content that isn't available on the weekly podcast. Every Patreon member will also get a free Unapologetically Outspoken sticker and updates about our new sticker release before they're made public. And be sure to follow us on TikTok at Unapologetically Outspoken. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast. The more you support us, the more people we can reach. So help us spread the word.